Hi, everybody. Hello, future people watching the seminar on fostering student motivation. Um, so thank you. I mean, we're going to just jump right in. And we have a few introductory activities that will kind of get us in the mood and make sure we're all on the same page. So in the chat, I have two questions. You can choose one of them. You can choose both of them. You got a choice. But I'd love to hear a bit about A, what brought you to this session? And B, what words come to mind around student motivation that kind of brought you here? So, what brought you here? What kind of words, thoughts, ideas do you think about when you hear the word student motivation? So I'm seeing new ideas, student leadership, engagement, need some work, encouragement, inspiration, new ideas. Great. And, I see Helen's, a few of what Helen is writing, and I want to acknowledge that when I was putting this together, I was inspired by the planning committee, which was made up of different community development agents that really highlighted student motivation as something that is they wanted to talk about during this conference, because it's an issue they are seeing in their schools. And I kind of got a lot of ideas and motivation around this from their ideas and motivation. Other things coming up include students excited to be in school, motivation, engagement, perseverance, keeping them in school, contributing to their success. Great. I came because our students seem to have no motivation. Ideas for student retention. Whoa, this is awesome. Retention, participation, cool. Okay, well, hopefully over the next 1 hour or so, we're gonna have lots of ideas. We're gonna discuss a few different aspects of that. And, I'll say, like, none of these ideas are mine. I learned them from other professional learning experiences, from an article, which I'll share with you in a second. But, whenever I do these types of sessions, I encourage you to take nuggets of these ideas and bring it back to your staff to work with them to address student motivation. It's not as a CDA, like you are one part of the team, but a crucial leader in terms of helping people out. So before we jump in, though, I need to just say this, that even though we're going to talk about student motivation and how there's a lack of it in schools, I don't want us to turn into The Simpsons, old man yelling at cloud. I don't know. I grew up in the 80s. For sure, people before me were like, "Oh, you kids with your 20 television stations and Nintendo, you don't know." I don't want us to be like that. I think student motivation is obviously important and is a thread which runs through every generation. It's something that we always need to renew and refresh, but let's not be those our generation is the best. Those kids these days with their phones. Okay, so I'm really into this website called Edutopia. Catherine, can you put that link in the chat box? Basically, I read an article which summarized student motivation in schools, and they talked about student motivation is made up of 4 different things: attention, relevance, confidence, and satisfaction. So for the next few minutes, I'm just gonna quickly go through it and give some concrete examples that kind of touch upon it. But if you want the real deal, just read the article. It's pretty short, and then links to academic articles. So attention. There's a thing around hey, perceptual arousal, oh, wait, what? And what are we doing in schools to kind of wake up the kids a bit, to kind of switch them on? That is an aspect of student motivation. When you sit up and be like, oh, there's something going on here, I'm going to pay attention. So that's a real quick one. Other ideas which I've been really interested in is, I hear about conversation prompts, or this is something which comes from the New York Times, which is a website for teachers, or start every class with a what's going on in this picture. And they got different prompts. You'll see on the right, my right, what's going on in this picture, what makes you say that, what more can you find? A chance to get students to share ideas, get their brains warmed up. Real quick, let's take 1 or 2 thoughts on what's going on in this picture. Right in the chat, turn on your mic. We're a small group.
Can I say?
Go for it.
Oh, okay. I'm loving the little boy in the lion face paint.
Yeah.
I see a lion.
And what do you think is the context of this picture? I see Celia saying she does this all the time. Awesome.
I don't know. I just see him as being ready to take on the world. Just
Totally.
That's what it says to me.
Awesome. I'll fill in the suspense. I mean, this is pretty simple. Basically, a New York Times photographer went to all these different block parties around New York and took pictures. Like simple as that. But I also like, you go on this web page and there's just like tons of amazing photos. But yeah, this picture is so evocative. And you know, there's some are more abstract than others, but just awesome. So now, thinking about attention, what I would just want to hear some stories. Describe a K-11 experience that you had in school when you were in the learning flow and fully engaged. Was there something that you remember that you're like, oh, that was amazing? And this is and big, small, you know, I've got them too. I won't share yet. Anyone want to share briefly a story? Something that happened in school? Yes, Brooke, go for it. Bravo.
Oh, sorry, I bravoed myself. I meant to just raise my hand. But yeah, I don't remember the context. It was in elementary school, like grade 4 or 5. But I know we were learning about bears. And obviously like literature and whatnot. And we built a bear's den in our classroom. And then we were allowed to go with small groups and do like either silent reading or different activities on the bear chapter or whatever. I'm probably not using the right terminology. And that's always stuck with me. I thought that was the coolest thing. And I was so proud to be learning about bears, and anything I learned in that tent just seemed so much cooler because I could learn it in the tent with like a flashlight in a bear's den. And it was awesome.
Amazing. Love it. Totally motivated. You know, I've also got my story, and it's actually from elementary as well. Michael says when he was given free rein in projects, it was more fun to be creative. Absolutely. Anyone else have a story to tell?
Oh, myself, Anthony. I remember elementary as well, grade 3. Our new teacher decided to throw out the literacy and have us learn differently by writing our own Christmas play. The whole class was involved. We each had a line. We each had a role to play. It took us 2 months to put this play together, and she graded us our oral skills, our literature skills, our reading, writing, everything through this play for that term. So I always thought that was a fascinating way, and I loved acting to help me learn. So
Absolutely. I mean, I'll just say mine from, I think I was in grade 6. We like did the thing where you like we throw an egg off the roof of the gym, and we had to construct like something to protect it, and it was like an experiment. I don't even remember if like it cracked or not, but it's something that stands up. One more story. Oh, so one thing I'll note: nobody's mentioned a high school story. So well, we can go into that in a sec.
Ben.
Here we go. Catherine says, "Go for it, Catherine."
Oh, Catherine.
Oh,
well, it's Helen.
Oh, Helen, go for it.
I remember doing what Anthony was talking about too, writing your own Christmas play and stuff. That was fun. But I remember in high school that we had, I think it was 6-3, we had an English teacher, and he would read to us every day. He would sit so much aside and he would read, well, the classic novels and whatever, but he had a voice for every character. And it was like he brought the stories alive, and it worked for everyone because not everyone obviously can read at the same level. So he made the stories more presentable or more reachable for everybody in the class, the ones that could read really well and the ones that could not read so well. So everybody was on the same level, and everybody looked forward to that time during that class every day where he would sit in front of the class and he would just read, and the arms. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thanks, Helen. Bobby, we'll take you and then we'll move on.
Also in high school, I had the same English teacher for Sec 3, 4, and 5. And everybody had always groaned because she really loved Shakespeare. And it was like, oh no, not her. But I fell in love with Shakespeare in her classes. Every year we would focus on one of his plays, but she would have us read it. You know, we all had this huge anthology of each play, but she would then translate it into like English, today's English, but she would be acting it out and doing the different voices, and she would dance around the classroom like if she was Puck or whoever. And as difficult as the plays were, and also there was an oral component, there was a written component, because we had to learn one monologue that we then had to kind of say out loud, as well as write with punctuation intact. Our marks depended on the punctuation. I still fell in love with all Shakespeare because of how that teacher would just like dance around the classroom and sing, and just, it was phenomenal. I loved her.
Thanks, Bobby. Okay, we'll take two more. Celia, go for it.
Oh, okay. So when I was in elementary school in grade 6, I was pretty much the only Jewish kid in the school. And everyone hated the Christmas play that we had to do. And I thought it was so awful that at the time there were just starting to be a lot of other religions in the school. And I thought it was terrible that we all had to do a Christmas play. It was so unfair. It should be more multicultural. So the teacher sort of said to me, well, then if you don't like it, you should write your own play. And I said, great. So I did. And I recruited about 10 other kids and taught them about Hanukkah. And we all wrote a play, and I made them all dress up in costumes, and we presented it, and they all loved it. And the other kids were engaged. And it's funny now that I teach ERC, but I made them all participate in the Hanukkah play, and I taught them songs, and we all did it. And we made the school change the name of the concert from the Christmas concert to the winter concert. And the name stuck for the rest of I think they're still calling it the winter concert to this day. And I engaged them and everyone else.
Love it. And as I'm hearing these stories, it's going to connect to a few other examples I give. So I love that around kind of like student voice. Ed, let's take our last story.
Okay, so my story is a little bit different. So listen, everybody gives the specific subject. I'll go completely different. I was in special Navy school for 1 year when I was grade 8, or no, grade 9. And the school was away. So, and it was on the beach, like literally there was a sea, and we had a sea day. It's like a sea class. We'd go to the boat with the boats or whatever, did activities in the sea under the sun. It was really hot. And then we'll have a lunch break, we'll eat, and then we'll go to the class, geography. Now, the thing is, after being in the sea and after eating this heavy meal, going to class, we're all sleepy, really tired. Nobody could keep focus. So what happened is a lot of times we'll just fall asleep. So the teacher had this creative thing. Every time somebody fall asleep, it says, everybody quiet, move. You'll take a pen and just start throwing at the student the pens. And then like nobody fell asleep. Everybody stayed focused after that, after a few times. So I was like,
I'm still on the beach.
you know, like I found it funny, you know, even though, and it didn't work.
I love that because it's going to connect to something we're going to talk about. Talk about something in a second. Hey, Catherine, you can see my screen again?
Yes.
Okay.
We see your screen. Yeah. And we also see the little Zoom thing at the bottom, but.
Oh, geez. Let me just do that one more time better. Okay, better? Awesome. Maybe.
It's still blocked out by some of the dialogue boxes that you have open in Zoom.
I'll just close my chat then. Okay, so moving along real fast. So another aspect of student motivation is relevance. So like relating to goals or familiarity. And so kind of what I took from that was like, you don't want to, when we're learning and teaching things, you don't want like the thing we learned too far away from what we can achieve. You know, it should be, I remember hearing like the zone of proximity, you know, so, you know, giving students the chance to like learn and show their learning in something they already know a bit about, but maybe they want to learn more. And as an example of that is I wanted to share something I got from Learn from some of my colleagues involved in STEM or STEAM, and around choice boards. So the idea of giving students the choice of what they want to discover about a given theme and how they want to demonstrate that learning. So here you see just a small example of 4 or 5 different ways of demonstrating knowing, and this idea of giving students the choice of how they want to do it. So, this is just another technique around what can motivate students instead of everybody having to do the same thing. And for some people, it might be like the acting and showing it out loud. Other people, it might be writing a book or kind of doing some art or gamifying it a bit. So that's another thing. Again, read the article. So great. Also, confidence and satisfaction. So these are other 2 aspects. These are also 2 aspects of student motivation. And I'm going to give some concrete examples right now. But before I go there, confidence, we need to build in students' belief that they can achieve. And one thing I've been learning about and has been in the Quebec milieu of research is fixed versus growth mindset. I can't do it yet. Like, what is the language that we use in our schools to help students achieve and feel confident that they can do anything? And same with satisfaction. This is like a big debate. Is it intrinsic or extrinsic motivation? Does it need to be something within me that wants to achieve that goal? Or is it like, if I get an A, I get a cookie? People are different, and people have, depending on different things, different types of motivation. And I think it's there's a debate, but I think it doesn't need to be either or. So real quick, growth mindset. I'm sure many of your teachers have been exposed to this, and there's always the poster on the wall about I can't do oh, I'm not good at this. Instead of let's practice saying, what am I missing? I can't make this any better. There's always things that we can improve. And, it's the language that we use in schools, or the language that we are raised with, that is that inside voice inside our brains. And there's this idea that we can start shifting that into a growth mindset, because we're always learning, we're always changing, which is amazing. And kind of the last thing I'll show on this is around youth voice. So a few of the stories that I heard from our examples, there were stories of youth voice where I got to make the play. We wrote the story. We had this opportunity to do something. And I really enjoy this image because it shows this continuum of youth voice. One from just giving your opinions to participating to active leadership. I mean, Celia's story of I showed active leadership in this way, and it stuck with her and makes an impact. And again, I'm of the belief that we need to help take students along this continuum, and it will impact motivation. So that's a very brief summary I wanted to provide. These are ideas and tools that you can take back to your school. Again, to potentially plant seeds with school staff and partners to incorporate some of these different ways in doing. So actually, the last example I want to give is something that I think Michael Citrick mentioned, and this is called the Genius Hour. And this is going to be a 2-minute video. I love this guy. I go on his YouTube page all the time because he just makes these short little videos, writing prompts, things like that. And this is where he describes what a Genius Hour is, and a bit of if you want to do it, this is the real deal. So let's go for it. John Spencer.
Genius Hour begins with a simple premise. Give your students 20% of their class time to learn what they want. They choose the content while also mastering the skills and hitting the academic standards. With Genius Hour, students own the entire journey. They choose the topics based upon their own geeky interests. It doesn't have to be a traditionally academic area. They might like fashion or food or sports or Legos or Minecraft or deep sea creatures. Students ask the questions and engage in their own research to find the answers. Along the way, they design their own plan of instruction. They decide on the resources and activities, and each student sets goals and engages in self-assessment. They work at their own pace and set their own deadlines. Students decide on the grouping. Some work alone, others work in pairs, or in small groups. In the end, students figure out what they will make and how they will share it with the world. A word of caution, it's not a total free-for-all. The best Genius Hour projects have systems and structures that empower students to reach their full potential. Even so, there will be mistakes, and you'll have to experiment. But in the end, students are empowered to be self-directed learners, engaging in creativity and critical thinking. In other words, they own the learning.
So, one thing that I liked about what he said is, you got to keep it real. This does not happen by itself. It takes structure. And, but, there's so much out there in terms of ways to structure and support students on this path. And I'm just also intrigued by this idea of, 20% of the time, one day of the week to find their own path, and the work of teachers to make sure they're hitting the competencies. It doesn't always need to be teacher at the front. So I'm going to move it along. We're going to have a big chunk of time at the end to have a bigger discussion, but in preparation for this as well, I wanted to talk about a concrete example in a school where they're doing some holistic, whole school work around engaging students and addressing student motivation. So we're going to have a conversation with it. I recorded a conversation with a teacher from Burling Academy where they have implemented a project-based learning approach. And we're going to hear from Sarah. It's 15 minutes long. Yeah, but I think it's really great, and we're going to have a conversation after that. So please enjoy. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Ben.
How are you?
I'm good. Yourself?
Great. Thanks for talking to us about fostering student motivation in school. To start with, Sarah, can you just quickly introduce yourself and your role at Burling Academy?
For sure, yeah. So I'm Sarah McCaskill. I teach Cycle 1 English and Ethics at Burling Academy. I'm also the project-based learning coordinator, which means that I support teachers in their professional development and the project creation process.
Thanks. So the reason we're here is to talk about student motivation.
Mm-hmm.
A few weeks ago, we heard from some community development agents in our network that lack of student motivation is an issue and a concern in their schools. So I'm talking about the sense that some students are disengaged or not interested in doing the work in a way that makes schooling as we know it less than ideal for teachers and students. I was wondering if you could share some thoughts when you hear this concern being expressed. What has been your experience?
So I can agree with them, right? So I definitely can see, compared to 10 years ago, students are less interested in doing the work. The work ethic is struggling. I think it's more than the pandemic. Yes, the pandemic has increased dependency on technology, but many students are still there. It could be a generational thing. They're addicted to social media. Their concerns and their thoughts of what's going on in their peer groups are more relevant to them than ever before. Their addiction to gaming, right? They've become a lot more passive in their education. And more passive even in participating in activities, from what I've seen. We at Burling are doing project-based learning across the board, and we've noticed though that some projects are working better than traditional teaching, traditional projects to get that motivation back in the classroom, but it still is a struggle.
Next thing I want to ask you about is maybe one or two examples of what's worked at Burling Academy. But before you jump in, maybe can you just give a quick definition of what project-based learning means at Burling?
For sure. So the definition that we tend to work with, and like you said, it can be, I like that you said at Burling, because many people take it on different ways. So a project, the difference between project-based learning unit and a project, right? Because many teachers are used to doing projects with their students, is that project-based learning units begin from the start. Whereas traditional projects tend to happen at the end of a unit. So when you're finished your teaching, but with project-based learning, we start with a question, a challenge, something for the their own inquiry and research to come together with an answer. And sometimes, it's very guided. Projects can be set track products, or they can be very much full of voice and choice and open-ended. But they always start at Burling with a question, and they tend to be authentic real-world situations. So it's how to incorporate what we're learning in the classroom in a real-world situation. So we want to keep it as authentic, something they would face. We don't want to spend too much time necessarily on the imaginary. It's going to be something that they could actually be faced with outside of the school, so that they can start transferring their knowledge and seeing how the things they're learning in class do transfer to the projects that they're doing in class, the projects that they're doing. So
do you have an example to share?
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So, I mean, students like the hands-on projects, and they like experimenting. Those tend to be the very popular ones that, reach the majority of the class. So what comes to mind, I think last year they were building video game controllers. So still very much in their interest, very hands-on. This year they did electric vehicles. They got to create whatever type of electric vehicle and race them. There was a competition. In terms of experimenting, there was a soft drink competition, so they had to experiment and create the best tasting soft drink, or there was a chocolate chip cookie competition, which sounds simple, but again, there are a lot of different skills and math involved in that, and different levels. So those are things, those were grade 9, grade 10 WTP students. There's various student profile levels within those projects. And then, there's also the set track products. All of those, were set track products, where the teachers are providing them voice and choice in how they create their product, but it's very much the whole class is doing the same. We have other teachers that have taken on projects that allow for more voice and choice, that are more open-ended. The thing about those projects is we tend to want the students and the teachers to feel very comfortable with project-based learning, because students aren't always able to recognize their strengths as to what they're good at. And when they're open-ended, they can struggle to come up with an idea. So teaching them to do that is something that's a part of the process too, if you're going to go in the open-ended direction. But it's been interesting. I've tried out Genius Hour this year, and there's definitely some cool stuff that the students are coming up with.
And just to kind of repeat what I think I heard you say, is that to do kind of an open-ended project-based learning, you need to learn how to do something like that. So you kind of scaffold it. You start like in grade 7 and 8, a bit more structured, and then by 9, 10, 11, they know how they can go from there.
Exactly. Yeah.
I guess I'm interested in hearing, thinking about some harder to reach students. Like, in what ways have you seen them be motivated in a project-based, in a project versus, maybe that's not a good question, but like, where have you seen the harder to reach students become motivated in ways that surprised you?
So again, when it's been hands-on, and I think, one of the most important pieces that you see the harder to reach students is that when the project starts with a question and everyone in the class is at the same level, so no course content has been taught yet. So they're presented with the question, and then everyone's kind of at the same level, using their strengths to answer that question or to come up with things for that challenge. It definitely reaches those harder to motivate students, because they haven't already disengaged with the course content. So now as the teacher inserts, their 15-minute lesson, as the projects are, developing, they're going to pay more attention, because, okay, I need that in order to, bring it back to my group and build our vehicle, for example. So definitely kind of, I want to call it like leveling the playing field right from the start, and everybody then takes their strengths to go, has been helpful.
To put you on the spot, can you give an example of a question that a class might start with? For example, the electric vehicle.
So the electric vehicle was very like point blank. It was, how can we create an electric vehicle, or how can we design an electric vehicle? So that one, it tells you the product right from the start. And then they know that as they're learning in class, they're going to have to listen to how the circuits work, what about the battery power, what about the motor do they need to know? And the lessons are kind of fed to them in small chunks as they go along and left a lot to the student research, right? It's to get students to think on their own. So that question was very, I would say basic, right? Like, how can we design an electric vehicle? With my, like, I can think of my storytelling, it's how can we teach through storytelling is another question I give, and that's very open-ended. So that allows them, you know, they can come up with a podcast to teach through storytelling. They can do a graphic novel. They can do, you know, a traditional storybook. The only thing that's being framed for them is that they have to teach, right? That there's something to teach others or learn from in the story that they tell.
Okay, thanks. So most of the people attending this conference right now are community development agents working in CLCs. Burling Academy is a CLC.
Yes.
So I guess I'm also interested, well, I'm going to ask the question. Are engaging projects and lessons enough, or are there other factors in the lives of students that affect motivation?
So,
go ahead.
No, there's definitely more factors than just the lessons, right? Parents, all the outside factors are important. If there is no, if parents are not engaged in their students' learning, then there's less at stake for the students, right? Then it's like, well, it doesn't matter if I don't, you know, if I don't like this project, I don't have to participate, and there's no one on my case about it. I have noticed like a decrease in extracurricular activity, the student engagement in extracurricular activities, which is something I hadn't seen years prior to the pandemic, right? Students were excited to engage in sports and things like that. I've noticed there's definitely fewer students wanting to join teams. And I wonder too, if that's because, you know, staying late at school used to be something interesting, but now it's, well, if I go home, I get to play my video games, or if I go home. So there's that part, those pieces to it.
So I'll just jump in. So thinking about next year or years in the future, your opinion, in what ways can CLC schools encourage passion or engagement outside of school, outside of class time? Are there things you think that should happen?
So I think, and I know here at Burling, like our CLC has done this from the start, and there's still struggle, but definitely connecting to the students' interests, right? Hearing what are the activities, what are the things that they want to do and participate in. Hopefully, again, I'm hoping that this has just been a pandemic thing for the last 2 years where so many things had been canceled and things like that. But once we can pick up the pace, if we're targeting our younger students right from the start, get them engaged from the beginning, really focus on what our cycle 1 students want and build it, I'm thinking we can maybe bring that engagement back.
And I'll just say one thing I like about what you said is, again, talking to the students, finding out what they're interested and motivated by, and then finding the right partners that can come in after school as well to be part of those out of school activities, out of class time. So my last question is basically, what advice do you have for school teams that want to develop strategies that spark motivation among harder to reach students or students that need that extra push?
So definitely, I mean, voice and choice. You incorporate voice and choice in your classroom wherever you can. Provide them opportunities to, you know, actively engage in your course material, because we have too many students that are happy to sit passively, listen to the teacher, fill out the worksheet, but to challenge them, should I wait for the bell there? So to challenge them to, you know, be more active in their learning rather than just passive participants. Right. So this is something that we're in the middle of working through at Burling. So the main step we noticed is that we need to go back to our vertical planning, go back to our horizontal planning, because we have teachers who overlap in subject matter, even though they teach different courses. And we're like, well, that's a missed opportunity to not combine, right? And to really highlight the course material through a project. So we've gone back to, you know, the basics of, we're doing horizontal planning right now, then we're going to work towards our vertical planning in May and make sure that we're highlighting, okay, what are the must-have takeaways from our courses and how can we build around them? How can we make sure the projects that we're working towards are hitting those? And of course, you know, we want to allow voice and choice, but some of the set track projects still need to stay in place to make sure we hit those takeaways And then of course we can find the courses where open-ended is going to work better, because there's more room. You know, I think about an English class, like you can hit your reading, writing, and speaking in a more open-ended way. Whereas I know math and science are a little bit more constrained. So it's how can we make sure we're building perfectly to that curriculum? And that's something we're working on right now.
Great. What I hear from that is that teachers and principals need to take the time to have conversations to do it right.
Yeah.
So that's it. I mean, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us and sharing your insights. You know, I certainly watch what Berlin does with excitement, so that we can continue kind of, you know, inspiring other schools to take on similar types of work.
There's
So-
one thing I do want to add, if you don't mind, because I feel like I missed this part. Being able to be a CLC school with project-based learning has been so important. So and this is something I tell the other schools as well. No, it has been, because when we plan our projects, finding those community partners is essential. And I think that's something I missed saying before, is to create that real world experience. We want experts in the classroom. We want community partners in the classroom. And so at the start of the year, we start our, we start our Google Doc with our list of projects, and the teachers put down their needs. And our CDAs have been amazing at going and finding the right people to connect to our projects. So being a CLC school has been essential to our project-based learning experience here at Berlin.
Great. That's great advice and a great tip.
Yeah.
Yay, CDAs.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sarah, so much for taking the time, and wishing you a very nice day.
Thank you so much, Ben. Take care.
Bye. Okay. Yay. She was great to talk to. And, you know, wanting to speak to a teacher from their perspective to kind of connect the two. So I wanted to kind of take 20 minutes and have a more open conversation. If, you know, we don't have things to talk about, I've got a plan B for something we can talk about. But you know, one thing I miss from in-person conferences is the chance to have conversations and CDA sharing what's working in their schools, and also where there are specific issues or problems that other CDAs or principals might have tips on, or community partners. So I guess I invite people to respond to what they heard throughout the little presentation and the conversation with Sarah. And also just bring up, you know, what brought you to this around student motivation, questions that you might have, or things that have worked for you that you want to share. The floor is yours. Michael, C-Truck.
Got it right. It's not so much students. I was just remarking that certain things kind of seem kind of obvious. Now, she's talking about students, obviously, but it comes the same thing with adults in the workplaces. If you're not motivated, if you're not constantly like being tested and using your creativity and using your skills and finding new things to do every day, for most people, I'm going to speak for myself, I would be bored out of my mind and I would not be interested in actually showing up and doing the hardest job I can. It's the same thing with kids. If they know, oh, tomorrow I have French, I'm going to have to read this book for 20 minutes and we're going to talk about it. Then we're going to have math class and I have to do addition, and it is boring. Speaking for myself, when I was a kid, those were the classes I hated the most. That was a large part of high school, so I did not love it that much. Elementary really depended on the teacher. So
I'm going to put the question to you. What are you doing in your CLC schools to make sure that that is not the experience of students?
I try, and I don't know if I'm doing a perfect job, I try to find outside resources, organizations, people that will give the kids new experiences and new ideas for the teachers. Right? So not everything works out, obviously. Not every teacher is super thrilled about having visitors in their class or trying something new. Yeah, I mean, that's normal. A lot of people are like what they're doing. But I try to find things that could be interesting, different, doing a cooking course in your class, Maison Méridien coming to the school, making Dreamcatcher, like something different that breaks up the monotony of their everyday lives. And on a personal level, if I was in school and I always had, not daily, obviously, but if I always had something different and I was stimulated in different ways, I think I probably would have enjoyed certain parts of it a lot more than I did. So I don't know, does that answer the question?
That's yeah. I mean, and I'll just say, hearing from the video with Sarah, it's, and this is my opinion, CDAs and teachers working together to make sure those learning opportunities are like connected in the right ways, so that they're not kind of lost into the air. Thank you. Celia, you want to comment?
Sure. There were 3 different things actually that I just jotted down. First of all, I do use choice boards in both my drama class and ERC, but especially in drama, where I actually gave them a Google form and they could fill out things they liked, they didn't like. So I had an idea of what interested them. I've been teaching drama for a long time, but I took over someone else's drama class that I didn't teach, and I didn't know them so well. So I wanted to know their interests, and they really liked and appreciated that. And then I said, okay, I've narrowed it down. We only have this much time to the end of the year. So I gave them a choice of certain things, and they had to do like one of this area and one of this area, because there were certain skills they had to do, and they could choose how to do it. So once they chose how to do the activity, they could do it live or video. So that gave them a choice. Some kids like performing live, and some want to make sure it's perfect. So they have to do a video so they can edit it. And some hate doing videos because they don't want to edit. And so that was also very good. So giving them a choice of the activity that they could want and the best way they could show their learning was very appropriate for them. The other thing that I've done, especially in grade 10, is cross-curricular. And the other thing is I don't see enough teachers doing this. So when I wanted to do something cross-curricular, they were like, well, is this drama or ERC? I don't get it. I don't understand. So this is something obviously was difficult because no other teachers are doing this. But when I was teaching about the Holocaust, and then they had to do this video about it, and they had to act something out, that took English, ERC, drama, and put it all together for them. And you don't get a lot of time for each subject. So I said, this is great. You will be able to have marks for all your subjects, do less work, and have more school time for it. So that also appealed to them. And they liked the idea of doing something that they saw the relevance in every subject. So that's something else she talked about. And the third quick point was I do another program called YPI Youth Philanthropy Initiative. I don't know if some are familiar with it. The kids have to research different charities. They have to advocate for them. They do a presentation, and then there's real grant money that they can win for a charity. And the kids were so engaged with this. They had to go out, visit a charity, interview people, do a presentation. We had real judges come from the community. The newspapers came. It was wonderful. And now that they're not allowed to go visit the charity and it's just an online thing, they're not engaged. Oh, I can't believe we have to do this. This is so boring. Why are you making us do this? So it went from, this is so amazing. I had to learn how to take the bus, and I went to the charity. I had no idea this is going on in our community, to, oh my God, I can't believe we have to do this. And it's been a disaster this year. So now you see the difference between being passive and actually going out and making it real for them. So that was just my contribution.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. Fascinating. Another question or idea. Otherwise, I'm going to pose a burning question to the group. Okay, I'm going to pose a question because this is, I gave some examples of different innovative strategies and techniques that one might be able to use in a school and in a classroom to tap into motivation. We heard from Sarah about project-based learning at Burling. This is a genuine question. What have people done around working with particular teachers or school staff to like nudge them a little bit, to take advantage of a partnership, or to work to like tweak their lessons or projects in a way that spark students in their class? Has anyone had any experience with this or any ideas to share? Sumin, go ahead.
I don't know if it's so much as, nudging the teacher towards doing their project, or I find a lot of this is it's really, I respect teacher and their expertise and their way of teaching. But I think the unique positions that we have as CDAs and my experience, and those of you who signed in early, Ben and I were chatting about this, about the school play. There was a lot of talk about theater. But what I really appreciate is once you build, like we talked this morning about connections and trust building and relationships, but having those relationships with teachers where they can just come to you and say, I have this idea, I have this dream, and they have trust in you, and you can have this conversation. And last summer, we had one of this conversation with a drama and English teacher. And she wanted to perform a play that looked at bullying, LGBT issues, but she said, but it's a really big production. But I said, you know what, I think this is the type of project that if we approach it in a certain way, we can find a lot of community support for. So I think as a CDA, that's where we can bring is we can say, here is your, this is ultimately what you want to do. Here are different ways of achieving it, where we can gather, like align it with what our partners want to see or other stakeholders are willing to do. And we hold those, we hold those relationships with so many other spheres. Does that answer that question?
Yes, I was just looking for the flyer from the play you produced. I love the idea of like being open or having the relationship with teachers so they can come to you with ideas that you can support. Love it. Carmen.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Making sure that you have a good connection with your teachers and that you're open to their projects, especially. I'm really fortunate in that circumstance that I actually worked in my school before I became our CDAs, so I knew them. So they come to me with their projects, but making sure that you have the resources to be able to have in place when you have a project that you want to present. So you're not giving any teachers more work, I think is really important. Because if you're offering a project to a teacher and then saying, here's more work to do, you're going to get a lot of resistance. Whereas if you go and say, look, I've done some work for you, but I just need some class time, or, you know, maybe we can do it together, I think you're going to get a lot of less pushback, I would say, in my short experience as a CDA. But for me, I like to work with my teachers mostly on projects that they feel are really good. Right now, we're doing a really cool project with a new addition to our garden, our community garden in our school that was brought to me, and working with pollinators. It's really cool, but that's what I think, making less work for our teachers.
And have you, like what you just spoke about, has it like engaged students who might be unmotivated?
Yeah, I would like to say yes. It depends on what level. My elementary school level, I would say yes. We have a lot more motivation, or we're starting to see a lot more motivation again in our elementary school levels. High school is still a struggle, and I like to believe that it's going to come back, because what happened, I feel, in high school is that with the pandemic and with parascolaire being taken away a few times, they don't really have a lot of faith in us for follow through also, because it was, okay, we're going to do this. Oh, no, we can't. Oh, we can do this. Oh, no, we can't. So I'm hoping that a lot of what is happening, and maybe what their lack of motivation might be, is they just don't trust us to follow through with anything. Whereas if they see maybe that we are going to start following through with some things, some motivation might come back in that high school level, is what I'm really crossing my fingers, because I can't blame them that that's happened. If I was in high school and I put myself in their situation, why would I go to a lunchtime activity for 1 week, start to do something, and then them say, well, we can't do it. I'm not going to put effort into it if I'm 14, 15, 16. I'm going to go out to eat with my friends instead.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I'm not an expert in this field, but I also like to appreciate that teenagers are teenagers and they like to go and eat with their friends also.
I agree.
And so like, what are the spaces and places where we, can be.
And I really like what you said in the beginning, where I'm very big on, I'm never going to look at my teenagers and say, hey, get off your phones. I actually would rather turn that into a positive and try and meet them where they're at, and instead of having them meet me where I'm at, where I'm the adult in the situation.
Mhm.
They're teenagers, it's their job. It's our job to meet them where they're at, not vice versa.
Thank you, Carmen. Bobby, your hand is up.
Yeah, I wanted just to say how just the same way that some teachers have that trust in us and come to us with project ideas or dreams, it's nice when you have those teachers that trust you and know that when you send something out, or when you go to them and you say, you know, I have this resource, I have this person, I have something that I want to bring to your classroom, you know, they've got that trust in you already. You've built that relationship. So they know that they can trust what it is that you're offering them actually works for their classroom, for their curriculum, for their students in, you know, whichever way you've seen it. You know what I mean? And I have a couple of those teachers in the building where I'll send them resources just to use in their classroom without me being implicated, or I will target specific teachers and say, look, I met this person and this is what she can do. I see her coming in your class for A, B, C, D, you know, and they jump on it. So you know, I think it has to be a relationship. There has to be trust on both ends, as well as, you know, the trust that you're giving me something valid, but you're also going to be there if I need help. You're also going to be there if something falls through.
Great, thank you. Great
Ben,
advice.
if I
Yeah,
can just interject here, and I love that, Bobby, you said that, because it's a great, just like, point to invite people to the communications plenary on day 3, because we're going to be diving deep into that communication with staff.
Yeah.
And you'll hear a little bit more from Bobby there too. So put it in your calendar.
Absolutely. And I'll just say, you know, every session we've been, it's like connections, relationships, like so important. Stephanie.
Sorry. So I was just going to say something quickly. Obviously, so Burling Academy is my school. Not everybody knows. And I'm very, very fortunate to work with them. Sarah is amazing. But I don't know for many people, in my case, the trust comes from the students as well, right? So if the teachers have an idea, my kids will show up in my office and say, you know, so-and-so sent me here. This is our idea. Who can you get for us? How could we make this project happen? And I find with my Burling kids who struggle as well, that's been a lot of motivation for them, knowing that it was their idea. Miss Stephanie asked, we asked Miss Stephanie for this partner, and it happened. And it's really a collaboration. I'm lucky that I work at 3 schools in my community. But when you have that trust from the teachers to say, go see Miss Stephanie and see what she thinks about this, it makes our jobs enjoyable as well, to be able to dive in and show up at these workshops and do these projects with the students. So I'm speaking on behalf of myself, but it's been a pleasure with that.
Absolutely. I love that. Other thoughts, ideas? Don't worry, I've got a plan B. Michael, go ahead.
I try not to talk too much, so I was just listening. It's very interesting comments. One of the things that we all have to recognize and appreciate is that as soon as our children hit school, we're doing 2 things to them. We're enabling helplessness, and we're enabling complacency. We tell our little kids, sit down, shut up, don't move. We expect them to sit there for hours on end, typically listening and not doing anything. And then suddenly, if we turn around when they reach a certain age or a certain moment, and we say, we want you to work on a project, why are we surprised when they go, well, why don't you just lecture me? I can take notes and prepare for an exam. We have done this to them, and we have to recognize that moving them out of that particular mindset of helplessness and complacency sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. The other unfortunate truth is that a lot of our teachers depend on being helpless as well. A heavy reliance on textbooks, lessons that are made well in advance and repeated year in, year out. We don't ever like to say these things, but that's just the truth of the matter. I did a presentation for an organization in the States out of Austin, Texas, just recently, and I was accused of being on the edge of the chasm of cynicism, but it's true. You know, we have to be honest. We have 10 to 15% typically of our teachers who are highly motivated and ready to change and do things. And then the rest are concerned, and I'm not swiping at them, but rather saying that their challenge, their focus is, well, I've got exams at the end of the year. I've got to prepare them for exams. I've got a lot of content I've got to go through. And their approach, their mindset is, well, how do I get through this? And so the quickest and easiest way for them, as often as not, is to lecture. And again, that promotes that whole notion of helplessness and complacency. So we're stuck in a very vicious cycle. And the last thing I just wanted to add that no one wants to talk about is the fact that we're very research resistant as a community. Educators just don't follow research. You know what I mean? If they did, we wouldn't be teaching the way we teach. And we do this year in, year out. We are research resistant. I did a presentation to a conference of Français langue seconde teachers a few years ago. I asked them, how many of you have your classes with a desk pointing to the front? And they all put their hands up. They put their hands up. There were about 200 of them. And then after that, I said, well, what kind of teaching does this lead to? They said, method magistrale, didactic learning. I said, what does research tell you? See, they knew this about research. Well, research tells us that didactic teaching is not the most effective way of doing it. It can be done in short bursts, so possible, but only in short and small bursts for providing information. So why do you do it? So, well, because I've got a lot of content to go through and I've got to prepare for exams. We're stuck in a very, very complex situation where we have a lot of great projects going on here and there, but as far as I'm concerned, as often as not, they're highly too dependent on individuals and outstanding individuals who are doing things. They're fireworks, and as long as these teachers are there with their support from their principal and so on and so forth, these wonderful projects go on. As soon as that principal moves on or the teacher moves on, the projects fade. And it's a little bit like, as I said, fireworks. They're there, they're beautiful while they last, but they're not sustainable. So we have a lot of challenges. I'm a firm believer in that when we take a community approach to things, we can make a difference. So a few comments and I'm done.
And on that, Michael, I'm going to use that as a quick segue. So we're like at the end of the presentation. If it's not obvious, this is something that is interesting and like motivating for me, I guess I'll say. So if this is a conversation you want to continue, like you just call me, I'm happy to talk to you, work with any CLC school around ways we can bring these ideas to fruition. Two resources I want to just like dangle. So one is, this is like, remember I showed you that video before by John, whatever his name is, I forget all of a sudden. This is a thing around design thinking frameworks for students around how we can work with students and teachers to come up with great ideas and inspiring curriculum, and putting drivers putting students in the driver's seat.
Design thinking is a flexible framework.
And then the last thing I want to share, and this is like, hey, Ben, I want to talk about this more. This is something we call an eco-cycle planning framework. And it's this idea that, like, I mean, in a way, what Michael said, like things are always evolving and changing. And this is a tool that I was reminded about. That's a great way to like map what is already happening in schools. And then, thinking about the conversation we just had, like, where do we want to go? And it's a great tool to use with teachers or principals to just like lay it all out. Like, what are we doing well? What do we need to change? And kind of go from there. So those are kind of like the last two things I wanted to leave you with. I'm going to share these resources with you, but I mean, want to just thank you all for showing up. I really enjoyed this conversation. I look forward to having more of it. And so with that, like, we got 1 minute. Any last words or thoughts before we go back to the next session to say goodbye to each other for today? I talk so fast. Okay, let's go for it. Let's head out. But again, like, I love talking about this. So let's continue the conversation. Oh, I should stop sharing. Bye, everybody. See you in a minute.